Jeffrey Hayzlett.
Jeff Hayzlett.
Jeff Hayzlett.
Jeffrey Hayzlett.
Jeff Hayzlett.
Jeffrey Hayzlett.
But without question, the wave is coming. For some people, the wave's already here. It's going to be scary. It's scary now. Someone's going to build a deep fake of some executive and say something and put this out, and you're going to watch the stock plummet to zero, put the company out of business because it was a fake generated AI. I have conversations by video with the other members of the board and the company officers and with my company and with our people without ever really talking to them face to face, but we're doing video. But how do I know that video is real? Watching or listening right now, this is real. He's real, I'm real. So be yourself. You don't have to be polished. You're gonna think you need to be like that guy or that gal or this person. You gotta look like that. That's all bullshit. Just be you. Who wants to fail, man? You're gonna fail. Let's just be clear, right? That's the point. You're always gonna fail. People ask me all the time, hey, what's your biggest failure? And I say, I don't know, I haven't done it yet. Which what I mean by that is that I fail a lot, and they're big ones. But there's a bigger one coming, because that's just the nature of it.
Jeffrey Hayzlett is a globally recognized business executive, author, and media personality, famously named the Celebrity CMO by Forbes. He has served as a judge on NBC's Celebrity Apprentice, hosted shows on Bloomberg and C-Suite TV, and today leads the C-Suite Network, the world's largest community of C-level executives. Over his career, Jeffrey has been involved in buying and selling more than 250 businesses worth over $25 billion, making him powerhouse voice on leadership, growth, and bold decision making.
Welcome, Jeffrey. Welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I was looking through your career. You have really touched the pinnacle of the success. You bought and sold over 250 companies, over multi-billion dollars in transactions. Is that you did like those companies? You sell so fast, 250?
Oh, that was
huge list.
Yeah, it was a big list. No, that was the ultimate goal. That was most of those companies, about 160 of them roughly, were all in one industry and one acquisition. We did 118 in less than a year.
Okay,
So we were doing a roll up. And so my job was I was the spear, point of the spear. And so my job was to go out literally every day and meet with these companies, one or two a day per city, and make the determination, on the back of a napkin, whether we were buying these companies. And here was our formula. So we had a thesis around that we believed we could roll these companies. That was the printing industry. This is back in the early 90s, 94, 95. And so up until 2001. Yeah, so we were doing it during that time period. So it moved us along pretty heavily to get that done. So yeah, the thesis was to buy a bunch of companies, roll them up, and make one big entity, which is what we did. And we went public, $2 billion, fairly successful roll-up in company.
It wasn't like a venture capitalist.
No, we did have some good money. We had some backers, but we had a good base of a public company in terms of doing that. So we renamed the company. It was Mailwell was the name of the company. We named it Synveo.
Okay.
Why? Just because we needed a name, and there was a Spanish reason behind the name and so forth, so we could make a case for it. But we had all these companies, and so we needed a branded house. And so rather than a house of brands, and they were, at that time, you had, Collins Printing, Adams Printing, Mailwell, Quality Printing. We had all these different companies. Well, to show one name, that's what like an R.R. Donnelley at the time was one of our big competitors in subsegments. They were also a partner of ours, which you find in most industries where, like at Kodak, when I was at Kodak, one of our biggest competitors was Xerox right across the river in Rochester, New York. But they were also one of our biggest partners too. We sold, hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment to them and services to them, and vice versa. We use their equipment as well. That's what happens in big companies sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting part of the corporate sector. Yeah, you are rival and friends at the same time.
Yeah, you might be a big, SaaS company, but you're using somebody else's software too. So, that's just the nature of it. Co-opetition, sometimes some people call it, but you cooperate and sometimes you have competition.
I want to talk about, you are leading C-Suite Network.
Mm-hmm.
You have started that Create Execs, to build entrepreneurs and that ecosystem. From your statements also, I have heard from you most of times, Like, it doesn't matter Wall Street or Main Street.
Right.
Execs are
Zero. It's zero.
everyone thinks the same way. It's just a level and scale. Where do you think like entrepreneurs are investing right now, other than AI? I mean, like indirectly or directly, AI is all over the places.
Yeah.
But what the vision is right now about those roles? What do you think? Talking with all those people, working with them closely, setting them up to success. What everyone is thinking right now, other than AI?
AI is going to affect so many people in so many ways. AI has been around for a long time. Let's be clear. We've been using AI. A lot of companies have. It is going to impact us greatly. We've not been using it to the extent that we're about to use it. You know, I was talking with somebody this morning who said they didn't have one AI tool on their phone. And I said, you better hurry up or you're going to be obsolete, right? And I think that's the key question is we're trying to figure out, and I think whether you're in the boardroom of a major company or you're in the chair of your office and on Main Street, you're trying to figure out what does this mean to me? That's good. First of all, you got to be asking the question. I think the key thing is someone's asking the question. No different than we were doing back in mobile. You know, what's my mobile strategy? And it shouldn't just be, I have an iPhone app, nor should the AI be, hey, I have an AI app. What it should be is what's my strategy in solving my problems, making my company more efficient and so forth and so on. And then what are the ethics and ways I want to play it? Because I think there's some guardrails that have to be played. So there's a couple of things I think are very critical for people right now. What's it mean for me? I think a lot of executives, especially mid-management, are thinking, oh, my job is going to be eliminated. It could, all right? And then I think a lot of small businesses are saying, well, I don't have time for that, or what's it going to do for my company? And I think you really have to sit down and say, you know, in a human first mentality, which I think we have ethics to be able to do, we have to figure out how AI is going to play in our business and the way in which we want to use it. And I'm hoping that most businesses are trying to figure out how to use it for good, because there are some bad things that are going to happen with AI. And I do believe we've got to be very, very careful with that. But without question, that, you know, the wave is coming. And for some people, the wave's already here. And, you know, anytime you start seeing somebody who was a PPE expert now is a AI expert, you got to question, you know, make sure you're getting the right kinds of people that are, you know, giving you the education you need, trusted advisors, trusted partners. And so that's important. You know, so beyond that, I think, you know, then there'll be another wave of something else. I think that's going to be longevity, but that's going to be equally as big as AI. But we're a long ways from implementing everything, but it's pretty major. The other thing I think a lot of execs are thinking about is, as we're going through this change, how do I building my own personal brand too? Because I think that's important for everybody to be building your personal brand of you, so you're more valuable inside that company. You know, I did that back when I was the chief marketing officer of Kodak. You know, Forbes magazine called me the celebrity CMO because I was doing all this television and really being the face of Kodak back then.
Yeah.
And that was the role that I had to play at that time. So I think we need to be thinking about that too. Like, what role will I play in a more AI-driven company? And that's important.
You touched on human factors and emotional aspect of the AI. That's true. And even like Sam Altman also mentioned that like when AGI will be evolved, that's going to surpass human intelligence and emotions.
Well, yeah,
It's gonna be scary.
it's going to be scary. Well, it's scary now. Imagine it's going to happen. Someone's going to build a deep fake of some executive and say something and put this out, and you're going to watch the stock plummet to zero, put the company out of business because it was a fake generated AI. So we have to, I mean, you see stuff on this all the time. I'm watching the Instagram feeds, the TikTok feeds, and it's bullshit AI. It's not real stuff. They're saying these things, but it's not the words that are really coming out of Elon Musk's mouth or other people's mouths. So you have to be very careful. So even in the broadcast side of it, you know, we have hundreds of TV shows and hundreds of podcasts going to thousands this next year. And I'm very concerned about how do we, you know, qualify the content that we put on, listen to, or watch, so that we know it's not just two AI generated individuals, and those individuals aren't real, to, you know, what is going to be trusted content. So I think there's a lot of things being played out right now. We got to figure out, you know, a lot of stuff. It consumes my mind. I mean, you know, I'm on a board with a company called Immobit, which is asynchronous video, allows us to have conversations all the time. I have conversations by video with the other members of the board and the company officers and with my company and with our people without ever really talking to them face to face, but we're doing video. But how do I know that video is real? And so, we're talking about how we put, certification bugs, some kind of icon on it to let you know that's real. And I think it's important. It's important for us to do. By the way, anyone watching or listening right now, this is real. He's real. I'm real.
You have played a great role at Kodak for CMO, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But I have some data points about the CMO position today and in near future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you what it was back then. I'll tell you that. Go ahead.
We'll get there too. That's an interesting story. I want to listen from you directly as well. Okay. So McKinsey report this year, they say CMO and CEO relationship is not very productive for the business lately. So,
Yeah.
and the gap is increasing year over year. Only about 60% of CEOs feel marketing metrics clearly tie to business outcomes. That's what McKinsey is saying. On the other side, Forbes saying CMO role may be removed near future from the C-suite. Like Starbucks and UPS and Etsy has already eliminated CMO position from their leadership. CEOs are not confident on marketing outcome. Thirdly, another report says 69% of CMOs are unhappy with their tech stacks.
Mm-hmm.
CMOs, if themselves are not confident about their tech stack, how will they report on success?
Or even get efficient campaigns, which is a problem. When I was at Kodak, if you asked me for a list, now we had a machine that was $6 million. It was an inkjet machine, and we only had about 1,000 of those in the world, right? But we were growing it, and it was a big commercial printing inkjet machine. If I said I need a list of those companies, and you were going to hold my children hostage and shoot them if I didn't produce that list within 24 hours, of the list of my most important customers, I would tell you go ahead and shoot them because I can't do it. Because even back then, the tech stack didn't have a list of those kinds of things. So, look, the role of a chief marketing officer is the inception of the idea all the way through satisfaction, customer satisfaction. That's really the definition. The issue you see with a lot of these companies in terms of changing that role is they don't have good mutual conditions of satisfaction about what that role is going to be. So some people look at marketing as advertising. Some people look at marketing as direct marketing, direct response. Exactly. Or even branding, brand positioning.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways to look, or communications, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Unless you are strategic in the placement of that role and the conditions of satisfaction, you're going to have that issue. But clearly marketing does have a real role. Now, the problem with some of the numbers that you cite is because of the way most CMOs have gone into the job. Now, there's not a lot of digital natives that have gone into big companies and done the kind of things and have the background.
Right.
You have to learn those kind of things. I'm a baby boomer, in a millennial body. That's what I always say, or digital first body, because I've been one of those people that like digital. How do I automate, eliminate, delegate? How do I do these tools? I wake up every morning using Copilot and Chat GPT first thing in the morning before I even go into the office to do the things I need to do. And then there's some other tools that I use as well, but not everybody's like that. And so we have made a shift from, what was a broadcast kind of activity to a narrow casting of select, deselect, relevant, irrelevant. And not everybody has moved that way. And then the campaigns that we now do, we look at Kager, we look at all kinds of different things. And I can tell you 10 years ago, that was not in the lexicon of a CMO. That might have been some digital person that we fed Cocoa Puffs and Diet Mountain Dew, in a basement of an office somewhere. But typically that wasn't at the forefront. Now that's switched, right? And used to be, you could be a great CMO if you bought the Super Bowl, you bought the Oscars, you bought, different kind of, TV, but that's not the way to do it anymore. So it's a much more technical, much more digital job. And that's not a job for everybody. And I'm not, there's some great CMOs out there. Trust me, there's some very good CMOs, but there are a lot of them that don't have the training. But we have a great deal of a shift that most of the CEOs coming in today are coming from the CFO position. So they know about efficiencies. They know about driving the cost and cuts down, right? So they're not always the chief growth officer of the company. Now, we had a lot of CEOs for a lot of years who were the chief growth officer. They came from other parts of the business, not from CFOs. It's real critical that you get aligned. To me, to sit down with the other 4 or 5 officers of the company and that we're aligned around the 5 major goals for the company that I have to accomplish. I have to grow a certain rate, have to net a certain amount. We have to have brand values got to move at this thing. Customer satisfaction's got to be at this thing. And I probably usually always had a market share goal. Those were the key ones because my goal, and typically I'm a bull in the China shop or a Mack truck. So I'm driving through, I break rules, that's my job.
Can you talk more about your Kodak experience? Because I think we have a lot to learn from you during your tenure because Kodak was like sinking ship. Your time was exception for Kodak's downfall.
I founded the C-suite. I got a great team lead. And so at Kodak at that time, that was probably one of the best leadership teams I've ever seen. When I first took over, I said, well, how many vendors do we have? And it was tens of thousands of vendors in market. So I said, well, print me out from highest to lowest. And so they brought me this big sheet, a stack of a gray bar paper, printed out with the names. And I went halfway down, tore it off, handed it to my finance person. And I took that sheet and took half and handed it to her and said, send a letter and fire all of these vendors tomorrow. And then I waited, and guess what? I got no complaint, which told me I didn't go deep enough. So by the time I left there, I had 28,000 vendors, and when I left, I had less than 120.
I 100% agree with you. I was listening to another podcast by Forbes. It's like a CEO's diary for marketing, something like that.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the same thing, like marketing and modern marketing. So there is a little difference with this word, which made the whole difference. So
I would actually use word modern, but I would use digital. But the key thing for most CMOs is to be business first. Their job is to drive sales. The job is to drive margin. The job is to drive brand value. All right, bottom line. So if my CMO would walk up to me at Kodak or any company I would serve, and then he would ask me, what's the NRR? What's this? What's that? I know, when he would say we have to cut, great, let's go. Most marketers don't think like that. The CFO used to come to me and say, Jeff, we got to cut $2 billion. We need to cut $2 billion. Okay, let's go. What do we have to do? He goes, you're the first CFO that said, okay. I said, well, it's going to affect some sales in some areas, but if that's what we got to do, we got to do. Let's go make the decision. Those are business decisions. Most people, they don't want to cut anything in their domain. Well, that's not good for the business. I'm a business person. First, we have to make money. We have to do, satisfy shareholders. We have to satisfy our investors. I mean, those are the things. That's our first line of customers, in addition to our real customers that we're selling things to.
Your argument is very valid from business bottom line standpoint. But if there is no budget, then how come marketing can build the same level of pipeline?
Well, you can't. Yeah. I mean, I would sit down with the CFO many times and say, and then Frank was one of the best that I've ever worked with. There was not a lot of CFOs I always liked, but he was a really good one. And we would sit down and I say, okay, great. We're going to cut out 100 million. We're going to cut out 10 or 1, whatever. Well, let me show you how that's going to impact sales. He goes, what do you mean?
Yeah.
He goes, it impacts sales. This is tied. If you don't think this isn't a lever, now let's go look. I'm happy to, but let's take down the revenue too. And I would show him the impact of that. Well, then we spent more time going out to other areas to find the efficiency because it's really easy to cut marketing. We just won't do the advertising. So if I had a $17 billion spend, which we did, I would just say, no, let's take out $500 million or whatever. And we could do that, but that means that impacts the revenue if I've got the right levers in place to drive the business. But you got to know that you're doing that. And that's the key, is to know that those levers are like that to make those things move. So you have to make smarter choices.
Almost every marketing leader I've been in touch with and I'm talking to, and there is the same feedback, like year over year budgets are being cut. It's reducing. Everyone is struggling to at least generate same level of goals again, like same kind of results every year. Then what is your suggestion in such a case?
I'd change my priorities. I mean, I would make sure, so we have first of all, we have a great deal of a shift that most of the CEOs coming in today are coming from the CFO position. Go figure. So they know about efficiencies. They know about driving the cost and cuts down, right? So they're not always the chief growth officer of the company. Now, we had a lot of CEOs for a lot of years who were the chief growth officers. They came from other parts of the business, not from CFOs. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just recognize what are the mutual conditions of satisfaction everybody's supposed to be driving. And so, yeah, I get that you're going to cut, and sometimes that's what you have to do. And but you got to cut them in the right place. If you keep cutting, there's nothing left to cut. So the thing is, you've got to turn that around. You've got to switch that around to not. You have to harvest. You can't just scorch the earth. You've got to really plant and grow and harvest. And if you can't get there, it's time to probably look for selling the company.
Yeah, I was listening to another podcast about value leadership, value business.
Yeah.
And it's the same theory you mentioned even in that discussion also, that like have your value prop clear, prioritized, and focus on that only. So from your message, like if budget is reduced, have your priorities clearly demark like what can be achieved in the new budget,
Right.
and then just focus on that.
And it's critical that as an officer of the company. So when you sit down as an officer of a company, and everybody thinks we're always getting together all the time, but we might see each other maybe or talk to each other twice a month. Now we'll be in daily contact about different things, but by and large, we're there to do our job. I mean, I was like waiting around when I got to that big job at a Fortune 100 company going, well, we should have more meetings. What are we going to do? And no, we don't have those. We just do your job, right? But it's real critical that you get aligned. So to me, to sit down with the other 4 or 5 officers of the company and that we're aligned around the 5 major goals for the company. Now, in that 5 major goals, I have 5 goals, that I have to accomplish. I have to grow a certain rate, have to net a certain amount. We have to have brand values got to move at this thing. Customer satisfaction's got to be at this thing. And I usually always had a market share goal. Those were the key ones. Now, I also, one goal personally was I had to get along with everybody else. That was the other goal that they would put on me as well. Because my goal, and typically I'm a bull in the China shop or a Mack truck. So I'm driving through, I break rules. That's my job. And that's what I've always done. And so
I like that.
Yeah.
Break the rules.
Break the rule. Well, rules are meant to be broken so you can see if they're good rules. And if they're good, well, then don't do that again, right? Those are the kind of things you want to do. Now, you don't break rules that get you into jail or get you into major on the front pages of newspapers. But your job is to cause tension. That's the job of most officers, is to cause tension, healthy tension within the team, so that you grow, like a coach, like a football coach, or any kind of coach. That's really true what you're doing. You don't have the ability. And everybody thinks that the CEO and the CMO and CFO, we all have the ability of just like doing this, waving a wand, and it changes. It doesn't. You've got to get those 185,000 people, or how many people that are working for you, or 10 or 2, going your way. And that's not an easy job to do. But the first thing is to really be aligned around, the values and the goals that you're driving, the measurable goals that you're driving. And that's the biggest thing. I once had a CEO who drew a picture of a circle on the wall. And then he made a big piece of the pie was this, like 75%. And then another piece was 10%. And the other piece was 15%. And he said, the small piece is our companies that have to be this tall. What he meant by that, he said, we've got 19 product lines or divisions, and said, if they don't get to this level, then we get rid of them. The next bigger piece was our future business. And that is the business that we're going to invest in and do. And this is where we're going. And then the other big piece of the pie was like 55, 65 was was our cash business, where it's not the future, but we're making cash. Now, this was at Kodak. And when he drew that chart, he goes, what does everybody think of this? And I raised my hand. He goes, Jeff, you don't have to raise your hand. You're the chief marketing officer of the company. And we were at this big round table in our boardroom. And we had literally had about 40 people in the room, 20 around the table and then 20 some around the outside. And I just said, boss, I said, I'm not trying to blow smoke or anything, but that's the best damn chart I've ever freaking seen in my life. He went, Jeffrey, please explain why. I said, you just gave me my marching orders. You just told me that from a marketing perspective, we milk everything that's cash. They'll never get another marketing dollar whatsoever. Their job is to provide cash. That means to be as lean and mean. They might get press release. We might occasionally go to a trade show, but that's it. No other ads, no other spending, no other stuff. Now, those businesses that we're going to watch those. We're going to be on top of them. If we don't see movement the way we want, boom, they're out. We love them, but we're going to miss them. And the future business means we give them, they're our fair-haired child. They're our favorite child. We might not say we have them, but in this case, we have one. This is where we're going with the product. Here, take as much money as you think you need. We know you're going to be sloppy. We know you're not going to do the best, but we're going to get there. This is our future. We're investing and we're going to figure out where it goes. So it's kind of like throwing spaghetti on the wall, see what sticks. That's what we're going to do. And I said, that's what you just did. And so that's the best chart I've ever freaking seen in my life. And that's indeed what it was. But you have to get a line around it. Everybody has to understand that, because you can imagine if we're sitting around that table, the person's in the cash business is going, what? Where's my future? Where's my stuff? Well, your future, it's like being a lineman on a football, right? A football team, American football team.
Yeah.
If you're a lineman, okay, you're never going to touch the ball. In fact, don't even look at the ball, okay? The quarterback's going to get the ball, and we're going to see if these other guys are good enough to catch the ball and do the other thing, or we're trading them off the team. But your job as a lineman is to drive cash, in this case, or make blocks, push it down, grunt and moan and so forth. But we love you, okay? That's your role. And I don't think we spend enough time on what people's roles are. I know even in our business, I'm confused sometimes where I say, wait, who's the customer? Who's the performer in the relationship? Meaning our own teams. And then why is this person doing this? I thought that this person was supposed to be doing this. And you've got to get real clear on the role.
Clarity on the roles.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, ownership, accountability.
Yeah, big time. Well, that's where the biggest breakdown occurs in teams.
Yeah.
And our biggest problems, I interview a lot of people on my show, All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett, and out of the C-suite. And the biggest thing that most people talk about is talent, so talent's always the biggest issue.
This brings me back to the previous point we were talking about. C-suite roles is like, even when we talked about CMO role may go away, we also see like fractional overlap of all those roles as well, like CEO, a growth officer, and then customer experience officer.
Yeah, but customer experience officer, I think that's an interesting one. I always think that's the CEO, but the CEO to me is like the chief brand officer too. Quite frankly, I think that the CEO has to the brand is nothing but a promise delivered. That's a brand. It's not a logo. It's not the colors. It's not all the attributes that people talk about all the time. I hear people all the time, I'm going to go work on my brand. What the hell is that?
Yeah. Website design.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're always talking about the website, what it looks like, new pictures of me in the address or whatever. Yeah. And those are not the thing. That's not a brand. A brand is a promise delivered. So, but you go back and you think about the CMO role. When I stepped in the CMO role back in 2006, that was a number of years ago, that the average lifetime or the average job time for a CMO at that time was 18 months. My contract was for 2 years. So I was expecting to leave in 2 years. Because that's the turnover was so high.
You spent longer than that.
I stayed there for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I could have stayed there. It was my choice to leave. I left. And so I was ready for it. In hindsight, maybe I should have stayed another couple of years. It was very lucrative at the time. And I was doing a really good job, quite frankly. And and doing good. I was making a change, but the longest I'd ever spent anywhere was a couple of years anyway. So yeah, I just thought it was time to go. And I really didn't want to work in the corporation anymore. It's hard to work in a big corporation, even when you're one of the key officers, even when you have the power. You don't. You don't. It's hard. It's very hard. Now they just re-released the Prime, the Apprentice seasons, of which I was a judge on that show for a number of years. And I was 50 pounds heavier than I am today. So it's like, holy crap, man, was I different back then? But yeah, and back then I used to wear ties and things like that, which I didn't like doing, but I did. But because I thought that was the role. So be yourself. You don't have to be polished. You're going to think you need to be like that guy or that gal or this person. You got to look like that. That's all bullshit.
Right before Great Recession, you took over marketing for a falling company. And then for the next 4 years, you changed the market perception totally upside down. You transformed their marketing, like especially on the digital side, social media.
The social was a big thing. Most people don't know that we invented a great deal of what people have. The way the standards that companies follow were based on what we did at Kodak. And we taught other companies how to do it. I was spending $60, $80 million a year just in research. And I could eliminate that by listening to customers on social media.
Can you talk more about your Kodak experience? Because like, I think we have a lot to learn from you during your tenure, because Kodak was like sinking ship.
Yeah.
And you took over, and you really, I mean, your tenure at Kodak, I followed your trail, like after I met you and then I learned about you, I followed your like Kodak time. And your time was exception for Kodak's downfall.
Well, but it wasn't just me. Just like you said earlier, you're leading the C-suite. Well, I founded the C-suite. I got a great team leader, right? And so at Kodak at that time, that was probably one of the best leadership teams I've ever seen.
Okay.
Antonio Perez, he was really good. I learned a lot from him. Now, we butted heads, trust me. I was the young Turk. I was like pushing. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I showed up and think, in meetings, oh my gosh, this place is screwed up. Someone should do something. And I'd look around and realize, oh, that's me, And so I learned very quickly. But I hadn't been in a company at that scale, and a lot of politics, a lot of, kind of unseen or seen rules. And I didn't understand all those sometimes. And so, or why we had to do certain things some ways. And so I had a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, but that was like internal corporate culture. But what my point here is like your perspective, like when you took over Kodak marketing, the brand perception started to change.
Yeah.
Followership increased big time.
Yeah.
Media attention got back to Kodak, and like you got featured big spot places.
Yeah, so we did Celebrity Apprentice. We did more on the Oscars. We did People's Choice Awards. We did a lot of different things, and we did those all over the world, Olympics and a number of things as well. NASCAR, IndyCar, Yankees baseball. I mean, I can go on and on just in the U.S., but also if I looked at China, if I looked at India, I looked at other countries around EMER and other regions around the world, we did a lot of big things because we consolidated. I mean, there was a lot of things to do, right? I mean, like for instance, when I first took over, I said, well, how many vendors do we have? And it was tens of thousands of vendors in marketing. So I said, well, print me out from the highest to lowest. And so from highest to lowest. And so they brought me this big sheet, a stack of a gray bar paper printed out with the names. And I went halfway down, tore it off, handed it to my finance person, who I said to the CFO, I want somebody on my staff from your staff who watches and does everything and, inside my staff meetings so that you know what I'm doing and that you can guide me so I can do this. I did the same thing with IT. And the same thing with other divisions too, because I didn't have any data architect. I had no data and all these things. And I took that sheet and took half and handed it to her and said, send a letter and fire all of these vendors tomorrow. And then I waited. And guess what? I got no complaints, which told me I didn't go deep enough. So by the time I left there, I had 28,000 vendors. And when I left, I had less than 100 employees.
And the business as usual.
Business was as usual. We were able to make quicker decisions, move things better, better relationships, saved a lot of money, and just to send out invoices, handle purchase orders, things like that. Worked with the CFO to make sure anything that was under, I think, 5,000 or 25,000, we could pay with a credit card, things like that to really move things along. But yeah, those are tough things to do, and you have to really say, and you have to have a team. And that's what I was saying about Antonio and the two divisional presidents that we had, who became my best friends, really good friends. We hunted together, we fished together, we played together. And so wherever they went, I went. Wherever I went, typically, sometimes they weren't as more as public as I was. So I took care of a lot more public. That was my job, was to be kind of the eye candy. They didn't care for it, didn't want it. They were very introverted leaders, but really good leaders. But the key was, they gave me air cover to go do the things I needed to do. In fact, I remember one time I got criticized by my communications team because I said something about Xerox on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. They talked about launching this machine that they had, And we had one that competed. They had 2 to make R1. I said, you need 2 to R1. It's kind of like winning the Cupid doll at the fair. You won, but it's a Cupid doll. And so that was a backhanded kind of like slap at them, but still complimenting them on what they did, because we did $500 million a year. So the next day, Xerox executive sent me a Cupid doll in the mail, to kind of like, ha, 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 F you, Jeff. And, but a joke, but to let them know that you're going to get yours, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
But my team says, that wasn't appropriate. You shouldn't have said that. That's kind of not something an executive of your stature should say. I said, but that's the truth, and that's what it is. And I said it. Next day, I'm out with my CEO, and he said that was a really great comment. He said, it was as though you had a white glove and you slapped them, but you did it with a glove, and it was nice. And I said, well, thanks, boss. But, the team thought that I was inappropriate, and they came to tell me that. And he said, well, if you let them bring you in like a cyberboard, and they will get you, they will try. He said, if that ever happens, he goes, I will fire you. He goes, I will miss you, but I will fire you. And so that's smart. Yeah, but it tells you that's my job. Okay.
That's right.
That's my role. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's going to watch my back. And as long as but trust me, every once in a while, I did something on the edge of those ends, right? And outside the border, that he would have to call me and say, is that what I asked you to do? And I said, well, I thought that's what you asked me to do. He said, but did you think like this? And I go, oh, no, I didn't think like that. There was one time in particular, I thought I was going to get fired. And, but I had checked it out with one group, but forgot to check it out with another group, and had done something that could be very offensive to a certain population. Yeah. So, that's how you learn. But no one died. That was one of my rules. As long as we're doing it, did anyone die? That's the first measure. Right.
Okay.
And then did it work, but he also, one of the other best piece of advice he gave me, he said, it's easy for chief marketing officers. It's easy for companies. It's easy for people to use sex or comedy to sell. It's harder to sell sophistication. It's harder to sell value. It's harder to sell values. And he said,
yeah,
and at Kodak, we sold real value. And that was a differentiator. And so his words were, don't you do that. Don't you ever go that level, And we did it once, and that was his way of saying to me, yeah. And I went, oh, I got you, boss. We're gonna raise the bar on that one.
You joined Kodak, like right before Great Recession. You took over marketing for a falling company, and then for the next 4 years, you changed the market perception totally upside down. What I learned is like you transformed their marketing, like especially on the digital side, social media.
The social was most people don't know that we invented a great deal of what people have. The way the standards that companies follow were based on what we did at Kodak. And we taught other companies how to do it. I named the very first, you just reminded me of all that. That's kind of an interesting thing. I forget about that.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I named the very first chief blogger. No one had a chief blogger. I named a chief blogger. And, everybody say, oh, we got to make the CEO the chief blogger. He is not going to be the chief blogger. We want somebody that's reflective of our audience. So we had Jenny Cisney was her name. And Jenny was unbelievable, just a wonderful woman, still is. And just, she was the epitome of a Kodak person, a Kodak customer. We had different acronyms or different, avatars for each of the populations we represent, but she was the chief memory officer without question. And so we named her our chief blogger. I named the very first chief listening officer. Okay. And people made fun of me in some of the media because, what do you mean chief listening officer? Well, listen, I was spending $60-80 million a year just in research. And I could eliminate that by listening to customers on social media. I literally knocked 50-60 million off that budget. And, didn't make my research people happy. But let me tell you, the feedback we're getting from products in real time, I don't have to wait for the next quarter. I can see it going on right now.
No companies were doing it back.
Yeah, nobody was doing it. And so we developed, like, how do you post? What if you have more than one person posting? How do you do that? What's the way to do it? And we taught companies around the world how to do that. And we did seminars, and we put together a manual, and I said, give it out. And people going, wait, those are our secrets. They're not secrets. Everybody's going to figure this out. Why don't we show them and be a guidepost for everybody else to lead? Now everybody will point at us and say, look how great they are. They haven't lost their edge. They've got the edge. And so that was a good portion of what we did. And by the way, I don't know, it was free. It's social. It didn't cost anything. And so we could do those things. So yeah, we were giving away video cam. We launched a video camera. The ZI8. That was the name of it. The ZI8. Why we would name something a number like that when it could have been like the cool. Like we should have named it like the coolest video camera of all time, right? It was waterproof and all this stuff. I had all these different cameras, and we call them by numbers, that's a whole nother episode. But I gave hundreds of those away to vloggers at the time, and and all I did was just use it. They, well, what do you mean? Just use it and tell everybody what you're using. That's all. And we hundreds of millions of dollars.
This strategy is still working today.
Oh, totally. Yeah. If you had a new product like that, yes, there are products and boards that I'm on, and yes, we will go and do that and it's called OPM, other people's money. So yeah, we want to leverage those shares. We killed another product. There was another product out there. I can't remember the name of it. It started with a Z, but I'll remember in a minute. Cisco had it and they bought it. And it was a flip. And because I said, I went on national television and said, we're going to make the flip a flop, and then we did. We just buried it. We buried it by our marketing. They were first to market. They did a really good job, but they didn't have the presence that we had.
I believe you were at that time kind of a role model for personal branding.
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot of corporate.
I didn't think about it at the time, but I didn't think of it at the time, but I got it. And then partway through, I started understanding how powerful it was. When I go through airports or go through different places and people would recognize me because I was on TV so much. Which is now they just re-released the the Apprentice seasons, of which I was a judge on that show for a number of years. And I was 50 pounds heavier then than I am today. So it's like, holy crap, man, was I different back then? But yeah. And back then I used to wear ties and things like that, which I didn't like doing, but I did, because I thought that was the role. Now I realize, be yourself, be you, be your brand, be your promise delivered. And I think that's important. But yeah, and now most great executives realize the power of a personal brand and how important that is. And again, I give my CEO credit because, I wrote a book and I was about to leave, and I, of course, had to sit with the legal team, and they had to see every instance that I used the name Kodak in the book, and took out like 80 of them or whatever, and said I can't say that, and this and that. And I finally talked to the boss and said, he said, hey, look, they'll never forget. They can't take that away from me. They can't take the way that you were the CMO, the SVP at Kodak. You were a senior officer at executive officer at Kodak. Nobody can take that away from me. That was cool to remember that. Yeah.
Any suggestions, like if anyone wants to start personal branding? So what is the starting point, the path? Because there are a lot of people hesitate.
So be yourself. You don't have to be polished. You're going to think you need to be like that guy or that gal or this person. You got to look like that. That's all bullshit. Just be you, And the other thing is, don't listen to the voices.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you hear these voices and they come from back here and they say you're not good enough for this or that. Stop. Bullshit. Just be you. I mean, I think most people, if you're being real, and so what if you mess up, don't say things right. I swear too much. I got my podcast has a lot of red marks on it because I say nasty words or naughty words. Yeah. But that's who I am. That's how I grew up. I do my best not to say certain things in certain crowds, but I'll say it on my show, or I'll do it when I want to, because if you don't like it, then don't listen to me. It's like, I once had a gal was following Richard Branson and I around for a week because we were doing this road show and speaking and doing all that. And she said, I'm tired of following you around. And she tweeted it. And I said, well, then stop following me. I didn't ask you to follow me, so if you don't like it, don't follow me. I've told people. I mean, I remember one time I told somebody, what did I tell him to do? Oh, go shoot. He said something very inappropriate about one of our bloggers and something about George Eastman. And I told him, I tweeted F you, F you. So I remember the corporate team come flying in and they said, Mr. Hayzlett, you can't do that. You have to be nicer. You're an officer of a 139-year-old company. I'm Fortune 100 and this and this and this and this. And one of the most iconic brands. You have to be nicer. I said, okay, just got to be nicer. And they said, yeah. I said, by the way, I just want you to know that's my personal account. And I was one of the first 1,000 people on Twitter. So I said, that's my personal account. So yeah, I appreciate you telling me, but thank you. And when they left, I wrote back and did another tweet and said, my staff says I have to be nicer. So I said, please F you. So that was my way of like, you can't tell me this is my job. Yeah. Well, that's good. I think be prepared to be willing to be agile, to be nimble. Well, look at running backs. Running backs in football, they can just run straight. They move. They don't want to be hit. Well, okay, the same thing goes for business. I don't want to take a hit. I want to be agile. I want to move we test you. You do different things, but you still got to move forward. So you're going to know that you make some bad mistakes.
Any tips for building networks?
Well, surround yourself with good, trusted people. I mean, we're building a trusted network. So I want to be surrounded by great people. I want to be surrounded by great people in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes it's wealth. Sometimes it's wealth through knowledge. Sometimes it's just wealth through being a great people and a kind person or whatever. So I want all of those things that mean something to me and be very defined about it.
If you want to hire somebody to play your role in your absence,
If I look at the CEO that
okay, so any tips for building networks?
well, surround yourself with good, trusted people. I mean, we're building a trusted network. So define the kinds of people you want to be around. Everybody says you can tell the success of a young man or young woman by the friends they have around, but I'm same thing. That's the same thing. So I want to be surrounded by great people. I want to be surrounded by great people in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes it's wealth. Sometimes it's wealth through knowledge. Sometimes it's just wealth through being a great people and a kind person or whatever. So I want all of those things that mean something to me and be very defined about it. It's like my wife will say, hey, where do you want to go for dinner? And I'll say this place. She says, you didn't even think about it. Oh, yes, I did. Because I know what I want. Right. And so the key is to really understand what you want and where you want to do. As my son is, I think, one of the best chief marketing officers I've ever met in my life, and that's my son. And he says, what problem are we solving?
Oh,
They started like, what problem are we solving? Well, that's going to put damper on the meeting pretty quick because you're going to focus, boom,
yeah.
meeting,
And
we're done. We're done.
Yeah.
So if you're saying, I want to build a great network, what kind of network? Who do you want to be in there? What's your avatar? What do you want them to look like? How do you want them to act? Right. And if you know those things, it makes everything a lot easier. Like, no, don't like you. Don't want you on. Don't want you around. I'm working on a project right now in Roatan with a developer, and it's a personal project. We're building out houses and condos and so forth. And one of the team members said, hey, I'm going to invite so-and-so to come over for a discovery tour to buy a place. I said, no. He goes, what do you mean? He can buy a house. And, that's a couple $1 million, Jeff. I go, no, I don't even want the guy invited on the island. He goes, because I don't like him. I mean, I don't like his values. I don't want him on the island. And luckily, I get to decide who gets to come on the island. So that makes it much simpler, right? So then, and if you can get other people to understand, hey, this is who we want to be like, this is where we want to be, and you have to be this tall, you kind of interview people. I think, in that way, you do a better job.
you mentioned in one of the podcasts was fail fast is BS.
Yeah.
Win fast.
Yeah, win fast. Yeah,
Win fast.
who wants to fail, man? You're going to fail. Let's just be clear, right?
That's
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah,
So
you're always going to fail. But focus in on, so what? People ask me all the time, using an interview like this, hey, what's your biggest failure? And I say, I don't know. I haven't done it yet. Which what I mean by that is that I fail a lot, and they're big ones. But there's a bigger one coming because that's just the nature. That's the way I'm rolling the dice. That's the game I will play. I mean, I once had a governor tell me who knew my business. He said, I bet you Hayzlett fails, but he'll have more wins than fails, right? And that's the key. And I've always believed that. It just is. I mean, if you're a great baseball hitter, home run hitter, you have a lot more strikeouts than you have home runs. But you're known as a home run hitter. So just move on. People ask me about failures all the time, and I can't always remember because I just go, big deal. I remember the big ones, like the pheasant farm. Pheasant farm. I tried to corner the market on pheasants one time, and I figured out there wasn't one. I mean, a market for it, so I lost my ass. But there's tons of them. And there's so many of them. We could keep going. But
let's pick one of those that redefined you, what you are today. And if you think like that mistake or something, if that could have done other direction, you would be a very different person today and what that person could be?
Oh, that's a lot. I'd have to really think about it. The one I'm thinking about the most or the quick was the only making. Yeah, we all make them. Was on the first days at Kodak, and I was there, and we were doing this video. Made national media coverage. It was on CBS Sunday morning, and we did it for the Wall Street Journal All Things Digital Conference. And we did this video. Was called the Winds of Change. You can go look it up and see it on YouTube. It's called Winds of Change.
Winds of
And you might see the edited version versus the unedited version, but inside of that was a reference to they have big brass cojones that we're changing, that we did this video. And so the team came to me. I watched the video. It was awesome. It was just like one of those things. And the team did it. I didn't do it, but they did it. But I'm, of course, under my direction and so forth. And so I said to the two women that were there, hey, that's some pretty guttural language. That's rough language. What about the women? Are the women okay with that? And they said, yeah, we ran it by the women's groups and everything's fine. And I said, well, then let it go. Well, we showed it at the Wall Street Journal conference. It went viral, and it was shown right before my CEO spoke. And that Monday morning, we fly back, and we're flying back. And on Monday morning, I was asked to go see him. And this is the first week on the job. I mean, this is brand new. And he called me up. I went to see him. He said, sit down. I go, I'll stand. He goes, sit down. And I knew, well, something's not right. He goes, about the video, and I'll cut it short because at the time, I could tell a long story about this. But, he basically said, Jeffrey, you know the meaning of that word. Now, I said, I think I do. He goes, I don't think you do. And he goes, I am Spanish. I am from Spain. And the word cojones is the most guttural term you could use for a man's gender. It would be the same as using the C word for a woman's, but you understand. And I go, yes, I do. He goes, no, you don't. He goes, did you check this word out? I said, yeah, we checked it, the women's group. He goes, but did you check it with the Hispanics? Did you check it with my people? No, sir, we did not. And I don't believe we did. And I did not ask that question. And I realize now I should have asked that question. Let this be a lesson to you.
To know your audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's, you got to remember to go at things. And so I've always prided myself on being a person of being in someone else's shoes. How do they feel? What would that be like? Because I've always been that. I was that kid growing up who was poor, didn't have these things, didn't have this stuff. And so I've always, never thought I was as good as anybody else, right? Most of us. I think all of us feel that. All of us have that trauma. All of us have some level of trauma. So I constantly I do my best, but sometimes I make mistakes. And so, even like when we were doing the interviews around Black Lives Matter and so forth, I would have people on my show, people of color, and I said, please allow me to have this conversation, and I am going to make a mistake. I'm a white guy who doesn't, I just don't, I'm not you, and then someone said, it's okay, Jeff, I don't see black either. And whoa. And I was interviewing a black sergeant from the LA Police Department. And I said, Sergeant so-and-so, I said, I don't know if you know this, but you're black. And she starts laughing. I said, you don't mind me saying that? She goes, absolutely not. I said, because I see color. We all see color. It's what we do with it, So, but we have to learn to, to adapt. And we have to be okay to make mistakes. We have to be okay with it if the intention's good, right? And there are, there's been comedians and so forth that have made stupid mistakes, and sometimes it's ruined their career. We're fast to react. And I don't think most people wake up every day to be stupid. Yeah, there are some. Yeah, we know who they are. But most people, I think, are just trying to do a good job. And myself, too. So there's lots of things that I have made mistakes on and will make mistakes. And the key thing is, did anyone die? And that's a key question for me. Either in pushing hard or doing something, yeah, it's okay. But I made a mistake. So did anyone die? I made a huge mistake using a mobile campaign in an ad program nationwide, and we did it in a motion picture theater. Spent millions of dollars on it. It was my idea. And well, what do people do when they walk into a motion picture theater? They turn off their phone. Well, yeah. Why didn't I think of that? I did. So we changed the campaign around and did it differently. But when we made it a digital campaign, but that was one where it was like, well, stupid am I.
Based on like that conversation, you think like the learning is, or the message is, know your audience and be prepared.
Yeah, I think be prepared to be willing to be agile, to be nimble. because, people tell, oh, I pivot. What you talking about? I pivot all the time. Well, look at running backs in football. They can just run straight. They move. They don't want to be hit. Well, okay. The same thing goes for business. I don't want to take a hit, right? I want to be agile. I want to move and we test you. You do different things, but you still got to move forward. So you're going to know that you make some bad mistakes. Yeah.
Based on your success and experience so far, where the entrepreneurs should be betting right now?
Well, I think it gets back to the core question that I brought up on my sunrays. What problem are you solving? So many times we get caught up in all the fads and the things that are going on. And so we let the shiny new button be the thing that dictates us rather than focus in on, solving the problem that you're trying to get solved. And if you do that, then you're going to keep the focus, and we have to do that in the C-suite all the time in our C-suite network of focusing in on a trusted network for content to help people accelerate, build communities, and then grow their commerce. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. I want to close the conversation with this one last question. Is if you want to hire somebody to play your role in your absence, who do you look for?
Well, I look for somebody that's nicer. No, I am. If I look at the CEO that I've hired, Trisha Ben, she's a very smart, nicer, just very, as I said, nimble, very quick and affable, and all those things that I am not always. I'm pretty good at some things, but not good at those things. And so she's a great compliment. We make a great team. And the same thing, Carl, my other partner and founder, he's the kind of guy who picks up the phone and says, Jeffrey and I don't want to hear this, So you need those kinds of people around you. So it's, so it's somebody will rise to the top and be that. I think rare.
I think that's fair. I mean, nobody can be replaced 100%. So it's better to have a team, complement each other, covers.
And they'll teach about, and constantly I'm working with both of them and others on the team saying, have you thought about this? What about this? When you create this campaign and that can be used over here, why didn't you just go ahead and create that second campaign for this group as well? Why don't we step and repeat? It's real simple to throw the documents into AI and now say, instead of this group, you say this group and then change it a little bit. So those are the kind of things that you try to get people to think bigger and think more strategically. And that's our job in the C-suite. My job in the C-suite is to be not the smartest in the world, because I'm not. My job is to be the most strategic person in the world and to really make sure that we're all heading in the right direction and try to get everybody there. And then, with that is you got to raise the bar and hold people accountable to what they say they're going to do, their promises.
And what problem are you solving?
Yeah, and with all of that underneath. But even if you're not solving a problem, you're getting your promises done, at least you're consistent and reliable. It might not be competent yet, but, but from a trust perspective, you got 2 out of the 3.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Thank you. What a pleasure. I can't believe the time went this fast. This is great.
It's awesome. So playing you.
Well, my pleasure. And thank you for being a part of C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV.
Of course, it's pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I truly appreciate your time and attention. If something in this episode sparked a new idea, shifted your thinking, or even just made you nod along, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are just getting started. We might have made mistakes. I promise we will improve. In every episode, I'm going to dive deeper into such conversations that impact us. And hey, if you're vibing with what we are building here, share it with someone you trust. That's how good ideas spread. Until next time, think holistic, think economics, think fast, and keep leading forward.